This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. My guest today is Reverend Bill McDonald. Reverend, thank you so much for joining me here today.
It's my honor, my pleasure, and it's always a great way to start the morning off. Being an Irishman, starting the morning off talking and telling a story that's as natural as having breakfast.
Well, this is a real treat for me. It's a treat for all of the listeners. You have had so many experiences, including 3 near-death experiences. So let's start out with your near-death experiences, and then we'll get into a lot of other things.
Okay, well, I appreciate the opportunity. I've had 3 distinctly different experiences from one to the other, stretching over from 8.5 years old all the way up. The last one was in my 70s. So not only are they different from each other, but they're unique, like fingerprints. I haven't found anybody else has had one like mine. Now, you've interviewed a lot of people with near-death experiences. When I say they're unique, there is a uniqueness in almost everybody's.
Yes.
But most of them have a basic foundation of, a parameter of, well, there's a life review. They do this. Mine are out there. They're out there. Or in the case of the spiritual world, it's all in there. But I started life at a young age. I don't want to brag or nothing, but
Yes.
I was so excited about being born. I didn't talk for a year. But but I was always spiritually curious, and I was making up my own meditations and meditating at the earliest age I can remember, 18 months, 2 years.
Wow.
I was doing things that I didn't find out, and we were talking about this the other day. I didn't find out these things that I was experimenting and making up were actually forms of meditation until I was in the Himalayan mountains, spending some time with some people that didn't speak English, and I didn't speak their language, and had a great time. And they're teaching me things. I go, wait a minute, I made that up. How could you be doing these things? So anyway, the first experience, and I just want to emphasize, because everybody else says this changed my life, this made me who I am, or this pointed me in a direction. I can honestly say that none of my experiences, my near-death experiences, changed me from the path I was on. Everything was just, okay, this is just another enhancement. This is just another road to where I'm going. I didn't find that it changed my beliefs. But it made a believer out of me. And what did it make me a believer in? Love. I was already into that's love is God, right? But having these 3 unique experiences, you have that point not just come home to you, but to become you. And all of a sudden you find yourself boringly talking to other people about love, it's about love. And people look at, yeah, okay, great, okay, go. It's only love. And the truth of the matter is, those that have really had the deepest experiences, they will say the same thing, that it really is only about love. And so the details of the experiences, which I'm going to delve into here quickly, the details are just details. And I think they reflect the individuality of each spirit, each soul, each personality. But I was 8.5. In fact, it was about this time in the 1950s. It was about just before Halloween and all that I got really, really sick. And I was going to school. My stepdad were sending me to school, and I'd walk 2 miles to school, and I'd get there and I'd be sick. And I had the mumps, and then I got pneumonia, and then I got pleurisy of the chest was filling up with fluids. Then I had all of a sudden my kidneys were, had a disease, Brice disease of the kidneys, which is a general term. And then this cascading effect, I ended up with about 7 or 8 different diseases, all starting basically from the mumps. It's weird how a disease like that, same thing happens from strep throat or things like that. It'll, if you don't take care of those issues, it morphs into something else. So by the time the school sent me home, saying, hey, woman, your son is really sick. Don't send him to school. And then I stayed at home, and I was dying at home. And it wasn't until my aunt came and said, hey, take this kid to a doctor. So I finally got to a doctor, and the doctor tells my parents, it may be too late. Take him to the county hospital. So I go to the county hospital. I've never been away from home. I was a young kid. The next thing you know, I'm strapped in a gurney about 10 minutes after I'm getting there. They're saying goodbye to my parents. Everybody's saying goodbye, and I'm rolling down a hall. And next thing I know, I'm locked, basically kind of locked into a hospitalization situation where most of the time I was in isolation by myself. Visitors about 10 minutes, maybe 15 a week tops on Sunday or something. And I had no toys, no TV, no radio, no newspapers, no coloring books, no school. Most of the time, nobody even to talk to except adults when they came in to do something for you medically. So that was my situation. So the first night, all I remember, I'm in the gurney. And you always see in the movies where they got a camera on the gurney and you see the ceiling with the lights and they're rolling down a hall.
Yes.
That's exactly what it was like. After I see that in the movies, I go, oh, yeah, I remember that. Just, not the lights I wanted to see at that time in my life. But I heard the conversation with the doctor saying, you brought him in too late. We don't think we can do anything. So next thing you know, I'm in isolation by myself. It's outside the hospital building. They had old wooden buildings. These are the days, the 1950s, where the wheelchairs were made out of wood, slats, wood. You rolled around a wood wheelchair. And when children in a hospital, there wasn't a children's hospital. There wasn't clowns and football players visiting you and everybody being kind and visiting. There was nothing. It was you're in a hospital and you were just ignored. So the first night there, they did a procedure on my back. They stuck these huge needles in my back to extract this fluid from my lungs because my lungs were filling up. I could hardly breathe. And it was coming out and coming out. And I refused to cry. I wasn't going to cry in front of all these strangers. I just sat there and they just punctured. I don't know if you ever had needles in your back into your lungs,
No.
but they're long needles. I mean, they're big needles and they go right from your back right into your lungs. And they're fat and thick because they're pulling out heavy fluids, almost like an applesauce. It was like thick.
Ooh.
So they get through, and I'm sitting there in my underwear, and they go, "There's a bed. Get in the bed." Nobody tucked me in. Nobody said, "Hey kid, are you okay? Hold my hand. You're all right. If you need anything," nothing. It was just get in bed, turn the lights off. So my first night away from home, totally by myself. I'm in a hospital room. There's not another human being in sight because I'm all alone. It's this isolated room. And everybody's gone. It's deathly silent. No pun intended, because there's something about to happen at that time. So it was really deathly silent, literally. And I'm laying there and in great physical pain. If you've had a bad kidney disease, there's always that back pain, lower back pain, and then the chest pain from the pneumonia and all that. And so it was bad. And by the time I got to the hospital, I actually looked like, according to my aunt, she goes, "My God, he looks like he was in one of those POW camps in Germany, or he was in the extermination camp." I mean, I looked like, it was no weight on the body at all. It was just totally like a skeleton. So I'm laying there, and all of a sudden there's no pain. It's just, oh. And next thing you know, I'm feeling, when I say light, I mean this in two ways. Light, like the body is lightweight, opposite of heavy. But I also mean I was feeling light, Light, like this abundance of light within me and around me, of which I was a part of that light. So the light, I wasn't distinguishing the difference between me and the light. It was kind of like on a movie screen when the light is showing on a screen, it's the light and projecting. That's like me being projected. And I notice I'm kind of have this floating feeling, although without a body, I don't feel like I'm floating, but I'm sensing I'm floating, and I'm looking down and I see this poor self, me, the old me, the body, laying there, and I'm going, well, I feel sorry for that kid. That looks really, he's bad shape, right? Thank God that's not me. I knew at that age the body was not me. Yeah, 8.5, and I'm going, no, that's not me. This is me. This consciousness, this, even though I probably didn't use that word at that age, consciousness, I just knew this was me, this, whatever it was, this filament of light. That's in my mind. I was just thinking light. I'm just this light, like a projection. And so I'm floating above it, and the room goes from this dark to just getting lighter and lighter and lighter and lighter. And pretty soon it's bright. So bright that had I been in a human body, I would have felt like I'm going to get blinded. I'm just like looking directly at the sun. It's just, but it's like light is just pounding me and it's penetrating me. It's just hugging me. The light is just a part of me. And I look at the clouds. No, they weren't clouds, but it was kind of like puffy clouds. The light was kind of like a cloud. It's the only thing I can think of. I intelligent, I know they weren't clouds, but it was like clouds. And on those clouds were projected all kinds of scenes. And of course, you got to realize at 8.5 years old, most people, they die and they go, and they go, well, I get a review of my life, how I lived it to this point, and how I caused problems and all. This, at 8.5, I mean, what are they going to review? So there's no life review. But in my case, there's a life preview. And at the time, I didn't realize how far it went. But as it turned out, it turns out to be like 50 years in the future. I'm 8.5. My next year near-death experience, which we'll talk about later, the next year experience comes exactly within a week or days of the first one, 50 years later.
Wow.
And that's as far as the future I went. So it was when it happened, I go, oh, this is the end of me knowing all this stuff, right? So anyway, so there I am, and I'm seeing scenes. I'm seeing President Kennedy getting shot, but I didn't know I didn't know who John F. Kennedy was. He was a senator, a congressman, or something. I had no clue who he was. And then I see him getting killed in Texas. I know it's Texas. I don't know why, but I knew it was Texas. And I saw him getting killed. And in my vision of that, there wasn't a lone gunman. There was someone else at least. So I'll let it go at that, because I talked about this on another broadcast, and one of those truth censors came in and said, the Kennedy assassination, the Warren Commission says there was only one shooter, and they labeled it as, possible fiction. I go, what? So anyway, so I'm just saying, in my futuristic dreams, there was more than one shooter. End of story.
You can say whatever you want here.
All right. So then I see this lovely young girl I meet in high school. Turns out to be my wife, who we're still married today. I see her and I go, that's the woman I'm going to marry. And I see myself in Europe. I see myself hitchhiking around Europe, which I did when I was 19. And I see myself in Hawaii meeting this kahuna. And I see all these facets of my life. I see myself in Vietnam. I see myself sitting on a helicopter. Didn't know what kind. They looked like tadpoles. Look at a Huey, it looks like a tadpole. It looked like a tadpole to me at that age. I'm going, oh, those kind of helicopters. They weren't even invented then. I mean, it was like, but I'm seeing them, and the shape came out. Oh, that's the helicopter. And I see myself sitting behind a machine gun on that helicopter, and I see scenes being unplayed, and I see guys getting killed and shot. I see helicopters going down. I see things that happen later on if we ever get to it. I talked about it. But when I went to Vietnam, I kind of knew who was going to get killed, what aircraft was going to crash, what was going to happen to me. And I refused orders one time and was threatened with the court martial for mutiny because I knew something was going to go wrong. And anyway, I was investigated by the CIA, the CID, which is the military group, by my company command, everything. How do you know this stuff? Anyway, when you have the unfair advantage of knowing the next 50 years of your life. It's, yeah, I got all these. Oh, here's a medal. You're nominated for a Silver Star. You got a Distinguished Flying Cross. You got Bronze Star. You got all this stuff. And I keep going, no, that's not bravery. If you know you're not going to, if you know the outcome, there's nothing heroic about that. I mean, so that's the kind of stuff I was seeing. I was seeing things, uh, major things, and then personal things. So, but I was watching that, and at the same time there was, I don't know if you're into astrology or anything, or numbers or anything, numerology or whatever, but there was two numbers in the middle of this that kept flipping. It looked like 29, the 2 and a 9, and then the 2 would flip over to, it was a 2 upside down, looked like a 5. So it was 2959, 2959. It was just kind of floating around in the sky. And so I was thinking that 2959 is, maybe I'm going to die at 29 years old. Maybe I'm going to die at 59 years old. So I didn't know. So we'll hold that thought, because at the time I didn't know anything about that. And some people later on tried to tell me when I was doing a podcast, oh, that's your Saturn, comes at 29, 50, just before you're 59, around 29, Saturn comes into your life. And Saturn is kind of like a change of everything, kind of like a death of the old self and a birth of the new self. Yeah, symbolic or something. I didn't know. But at the time I didn't understand. But I did understand this. I saw all that stuff and I realized that was me. And then I knew, as soon as I realized that, I go, oh, I'm not escaping here. I'm coming back to that old body down there, because obviously here's the next 50 years, right? So I ain't going anywhere. So boom, I wake up back into bed. I don't know if it was minutes, seconds, hours, all night, have no clue. Time when you're in that spiritual zone of light. There's a unique phrase. Write that one down. Spiritual zone of light, whatever that is. When you're in that place, right? Because I can't figure out what else to call that place. When you're in the other place, there is no time. It's meaningless. There is no time. There's only now, this moment. And so, but I knew, okay, I'm getting out of here. But I still looked at the 2959 thinking, well, maybe there's something there. And maybe if I don't take care of my body, maybe that's the other destiny. Maybe I got 3 destinies here, 29, 59, and who knows what's after that. So why I'm laying in bed for 1 year. That was the first night. I'm in the hospital for 1 year. If you can imagine, I turned 9 years old at birthday. I had Christmas. I had Thanksgiving there. No special deals, no gifts, no nothing. They did have some guy dressed up like Santa Claus came down on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve and gave me some candy. And as soon as the Santa left, the nurses come and said, you can't have the candy.
Oh.
And then they ate it in the nurses' table. I couldn't believe it. I'm going, really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I go, come on. So I wasn't allowed to have that sugar or something, for the kidneys or something. So celebrated the birthday. It was very quiet. No gifts for Christmas, no gifts for birthday. No visitors for Christmas, no visitors for Thanksgiving, no visitors for my birthday, no visitors for Easter, no visitors. And you would think that would probably create one of the saddest, depressed children that could you ever, that'd be the formula for that, right?
Right.
No, just the opposite. I look back at that as a gift. I'm saying, all that happened. And it benefited me because I spent all that time in bed with absolutely nothing to do. They'd wake me up at 6 o'clock in the morning, the shift change, because they got to come in and change the sheets, give you medicines. I got a shot every single day. I got at least 1 to 2 to 3 shots every single day for a year. And then I had medical treatments for like 6 years afterwards. I had to go back to hospital and everything. So I utilized that time. I'd lay there. This is where I started experimenting with. There's the lights finding me again. I'm lighting up here talking about this. So I was experimenting with things I was doing when I was younger, but I kept changing them. And Do you see that? There's an orb floating around my face.
Oh,
It's going to show on the thing there. Anyway, so I was doing things like pushing my eyes so they would focus on the spiritual eye, and then I was closing off my nostril, and I was putting my thumbs in my ears. I thought, well, this is interesting because when I do that, this spiritual eye thing it's a light show. It's like, and I get all excited watching this light show where this spiritual eye would just keep expanding, and then you're going into it, and then it's 4 hours later. You go, wow, this is cool. So you killed the whole day just doing stuff like that. So that's what I utilized the day for. Then I remember my mother belonged to Self-Realization Fellowship, which is an organization created by Paramahansa Yogananda in the 1920s, actually 1920 to be exact. And he teaches Kriya Yoga, a form of meditation, but he also taught Westerners, Americans in particular, a form of what he called, now you had to see that. That was anyway, I don't know if it shows up on here, but on my screen, I'm getting orbs. Anyway, so he taught a form of exercise because he knew Americans and Westerners weren't going to sit down and do yoga, wrapping their legs and doing all the postures and stuff. And this is 1920s and 30s. I mean, yoga was scary to people. It was the devil stuff. I mean, it was heathen. So he had these exercises that he called recharging exercises, which you did these exercises before you meditated to prepare your body. And so everybody took him at that. And part of these exercises is dynamic tension, where you tighten up, like you're lifting weights, and you're getting all this energy, and and you're doing all these things. And I laid there in bed, and I remembered that. I said, there's more to that than just meditating. Yeah, I'm fascinated. Me and the things going around. Anyway, the exercises I saw as a vehicle, a means of actually recharging and bringing energy through my crown chakra. At that age, it was the top of my head, right? Now I know it's the crown chakra, right? But I'd be bringing energy in, and I realized all that energy is in me. It's sitting there. It's battery. How can I use that? What can I use that for? When I got out of the hospital, and this is where this is leading to, when I got out of the hospital, about home about a week or two, one of our pet dogs ran out of the house, went out in front of the street, and got hit by a car. The car was going about 40 miles an hour, splat. And it was a miniature poodle, so it wasn't big, so it didn't take much. It hit. And so I go out there, and the dog's just, and blood trickling out of the corners of its mouth, the nose, the eyes, blood coming down, the ears. Not a good sign. I mean, you got trauma there, right? And it's kind of flattened, like the rib cage. And the driver, he's this adult. I don't know how old he was. To me, he was an adult. He could have been 30, and I would have thought he was an old guy. But this guy come out, and he was like, "Oh my God, and I'm sorry, kid. I'm sorry, kid." And I said, "Give me my dog." I picked up the dog, and I went in the house, and I knew that I loved my dog. And for some reason, I figured, there's power in love. Because when God loved me, there was a power there, and it was a healing power. And I also remember these recharging exercises. And so I focused on the dog and loving the dog. At the same time, I was focusing on energy coming through the top of my head, coming down my spine. And in my mind, these are my antennas. I'm just going to bring it from there. It's coming out my antennas, and I'm going to put my hands on the dog, and I'm just going to love it, and I'm going to do this thing. And when I put my hands on the dog, it was like clear, it was like that. There was like this shock, like call it static electricity, call it anything you want, but it was like bolts of little sparks hit this dog, and the dog cries, jumps up, runs around in circles, runs around the house, comes back. Nothing wrong with it. Never went to a vet.
Incredible.
And so I remembered that, and I go, I wasn't surprised, but I remembered that, and I said, love and energy heals. And that's been part of about 50% of what I'm doing now with my healing thing. Anyway, that's my first near-death experience. And to be honest with you, I was in high school and I predicted JFK assassination, told the principal and some of the teachers and people, they thought I was crazy because it was 2 weeks before. I said, no, when he goes to Dallas, they're going to kill him. Now, in 1963, you could say something like that without having the FBI at your doorstep.
Not today.
Now, if you say that, I would have everybody, kid, how'd you know this? You know. So, but when it happened, it was not a surprise at all. It was a confirmation. And then I knew that pretty much everything that I had seen in that 50-year thing it's all going to happen. And so anyway, I thought I'd share that first near-death experience. We'll take another session to talk about the other, because they're all different. I don't want to mix energies. So that experience I came away with when I left the hospital, I said, am I going to die at 59 or am I going to die at 29? I don't want to get sick like that again. So I became a vegetarian, never did drugs, didn't do alcohol, didn't do cigarettes, didn't do caffeine, nicotine, nothing. Meditated, took care of myself, and obviously I made it past 29. But we'll talk about the second near-death experience, because that just slides right into that where I finished there.
Well, let's do that. Let's take that into another episode, Bill.
All right. God bless you.
You too. Great.
Thank you for allowing me to talk about that.
All right. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you've got comments about this, please leave them. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you don't mind, if you enjoyed it, please give us a thumbs up. See you later. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.